You have your agenda, or you got your public comments?
Welcome all. We'd like to start tonight's budget workshop, and if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ed, you put your mic on.
Is your mic on?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We're going to start with our public comment, and if anybody would like to come to the podium, state your name and address, and feel free to make a 2-minute comment. Sir.
I'm Nick Rinaldi. I'm from West Meadow Road in Rocky Hill, almost 50 years. First of all, I'd like to thank the council. I don't know how it happened, but the food from Big Y is not coming to the center here for the seniors. I don't know how that happened, but we thank you. The thing I wanted to bring up is two things. Number one, the box meal by Meal on Wheels or McDonald's Happy Meal will not cut it for seniors. It's not nutritious. It's not edible. It's not good for anything, except if you're young and a teenager where you can digest it. And I can't understand how all the money that the seniors had allocated is being taken apart and given elsewhere, if that's the way it's done. And I would like to know how much of a cut did the seniors take as compared to other groups in the town? Did you take 40% of the money we had for meals out? Did you take 60%? I don't know. And it kind of bothers me because I had a lot of people in the seniors, in the groups, ask me on their behalf to come up here and ask questions. For what good it does, I don't know. But I just want you to know that people do wonder what's going on. As far as the cricket field goes, I know that money was allocated, I believe, before all this was going on. And I don't think the cricket field should be put on hold. I think you got new people in town, and they're not all baseball players. They're not soccer players. And I think they should have a chance to bring some new ethnic games into our town. I don't have much more than that to say, but to thank you for listening to us. And remember one thing, is that we're old enough to be your parents. And the way you treat us should be the way you treat your parents. Thank you.
Well said. Next.
Hi. Kate Jarvie, Limner Circle. I have to admit, when I first heard about senior center, what came to my mind was kind of a nursing home daycare for old people.
Sorry.
Walking through the front doors of the Rocky Hill Senior and Community Center, that notion is immediately dispelled. I want to thank the council and the town for giving us this wonderful, wonderful facility. We are all very grateful. We just don't want you to ruin it now. After the first meeting that we had, everybody was going on and on about these CRT meals. And I had had some experience with them in that my mother had gotten them. I had never eaten them. As it turns out, pretty much she didn't either because I found them all in her freezer. But my friend Bernadette and I decided that we would go and, stop talking out of our hat and actually sample it. So one day we went over to Wethersfield, signed up and got the meal. First of all, you have to fill out a questionnaire. And it was very uncomfortable. I felt like I was trying to get something that I wasn't entitled to. There were questions about, are you able to get yourself 2 meals a day? Are you able to grocery shop? Is there somebody who can help you grocery shop? It just felt like it was meant for a different group of people than we are. On the day that we went, I checked with Gina. Rocky Hill had 61 people at lunch. Weathersfield had 4, including my friend and I. So had we not been there, there would have been 2 Weathersfield residents at that meal, which I think speaks for itself. I talked to the person running it. A big crowd there would be 12 people, maybe 8. So anyways, we had our meal. It was half a plate of white rice, about a third of a cup of canned veg-all, a piece of pork roast, smothered in gravy, which is the only thing that had any flavor, a piece of wheat toast with butter, which you had to use to put on the vegetables so they had some flavor, and a fruit cup. But not the good kind. It was just pears and peaches and some pineapple, no grapes, no cherries. And heavy syrup. Yeah, and a heavy syrup. So it wasn't a particularly nutritious meal. Was it edible? Yeah, it was edible. If I was starving, it was edible. But the people in this room, we have contributed in various ways for decades to our country, to our community, to our friends, to our neighbors, and to our family. We deserve cherries. Thank you.
My name is Jacqueline Kirby, 1 Belden Lane, and I will say, just reinforcing what the gentleman here said, that I feel that one segment of the population is being unfairly targeted to disproportionately bear the burden of the financial problems that you're having. And it's to such a point that the cuts that you were talking about doing would be devastating to not only the physical health, but the mental health of the seniors. So I would request that it's not just taking dollars out, it's disproportionate. We are being asked disproportionately to bear the burden of the financial situation that you had, and it should be more equitably distributed. Thank you.
Nancy Harlow, 22 Westbrook Road. I lived in Rocky Hill 72 years. Now I'm going to talk about the senior center. The senior center we have today took many years to be approved and built. It is beautiful. It's a beautiful place. It's a fun place to go. Now let's talk about the senior meals. What is the cost of a meal today? Mitchell's versus the CRT suggested program. At one of the other meetings I attended, somebody did ask that question, but I never found out what the answer was. The meals today are like home-cooked meals. Why change them to make them something less of quality? Just to save some money? Another subject is our special events. Special events are going up in price for the residents from $10 to $12 with the new changes. Why are we having an increase of $2? Many people at the senior center today, including Jenna and all the people that work with her, they solicit sponsors for all of our special events. The sponsors are very generous. The volunteers handle all of the serving and the coffee. So why are we again doing another increase? It went from, I think, $6 to $8, and now it's going to go from 8 to 10, and it's going to go from 10 to 12. To save money, I pay property taxes in this town. I pay property taxes on 2 properties, and the people who live in those properties are seniors. So I feel a proper amount of money should be allocated for the Rocky Hill seniors. It's time to take care of our Rocky Hill seniors. Thank you.
Bernadette Perkins, 10 Clements Court, Rocky Hill. What? Bernadette Perkins, 10 Clements Court, Rocky Hill. I want to talk about the future. This whole crisis sort of raised the issue for me of how do we protect the senior community center going forward. And I want you all to think about, figure out how to get endowments, figure out how to set up a trust that goes to the senior center only, and that people, when they die, they can earmark money to come to the senior center so that at some point, like Gail, you have so much endowment, there's so much money in the trust that we won't come up upon this again, so that seniors going forward, they don't have to stand up here and beg for food. Thank you.
I think we're all set. Senior services are first.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. I'm going to tell you in full disclosure that I need to leave in about an hour, and I'm going to tell you why, and don't repeat it, even though I know we're filming. But I was just alerted by someone confirming my attendance at an event tonight that I agreed to be at actually last year. Didn't put it in my 2023 calendar. And when I asked them today, what event are you talking about? They said the one you agreed to be the keynote speaker at. So I said, of course I'm going to be there. I'll be a little late, but I'll be there. So I apologize and know that I will catch up with Deputy Mayor when we're done. So we're going to move on to the Senior Services Department budget. And I'm going to turn it over to
Town
oh my
manager.
God, Town Manager Ray Carpentino.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
What's your address, Ray?
the office right behind here. Just want to do a quick 30-second overview like I did last week. The proposed budget stands at $95,041,306, an increase of 3%, which equates to a 1.4 mil increase. The budget also includes our planned initiatives, as we had discussed throughout the year, for our school security, upgrade of town technology, recreation for the junior cricket field, adherence to the vehicle turnover schedule. I'm going to skip this next one, which is a phase-in of the CRT lunch, which that's going to hopefully come off. Initiation of the recycling pilot program, keeping grant-funded projects on schedule, maintaining our required education and training for town staff, and continue to follow our succession planning strategy, as well as transparency in our budgeting process. And just quickly, the cuts that we have gone through, which we have gotten to allow us to get to a 1.4 mil increase, is this is not a cut, but it's an addition of a SRO officer, but a $500,000 reduction in the Board of Ed, $400,000 in our Public Works, an additional $75,000 in grounds. We came out with a total of $2 million in cuts, which came out to a 1.4 mil increase. So that's where we stand right now.
I'll do seniors.
Okay, now moving on to senior services.
Pardon me.
Overall, we're looking at a 0.8% reduction over last year's budget. Major changes include conversion of a part-time position to a full-time assistant position. And also, what is proposed in this budget is keeping with the CRT program. However, maybe we can just jump into that right now to get that over with, hopefully. After we heard from the public at the first budget session, our finance director of finance and operations and I sat down with Gina Marino and went over the budget with a fine-tooth comb. In between Mona McKim and Gina, they came up with a very positive solution of reappropriating some accounts within her budget to account for continuance of the current lunch program as it stands now, without an impact to the overall municipal budget. And those activities that will help fund this include some price changes, and also for resident versus non-resident, it includes additional sponsorship and additional programs fund through fee funding. And I know Mona can probably explain better than I can the difference between what we had looked at between the proposed $90,000, the $75,000, and then what we're proposing now. And ultimately, it is up to the town council for the, as you know, to make the final decision. This is just a proposal that could address that particular item. Why don't you?
Sure. I think when the screen that you're on now, I know we've heard a lot of different numbers, so hopefully it'll clarify it, because as we're developing a proposed budget, it's a lot of moving parts. But I know you've heard about the $90,000 that was for the senior lunch program. When meeting with the department head, that was the original request. I'm just going to use my little mouse here and circle. Right now, there is budgeted $75,000 in this current year. Over here. So the request was from the department head to add $15,000. A lot of that had to do with the price of food as well as the price of paper products. So with that request, as you've heard from the town manager, there were a lot of reductions. It wasn't only this particular department, Board of Ed and so forth, we had reductions, but it was $90,000 request, which was an increase from the 75. What the town manager's budget has is an approval of the 20,000, which was a reduction, if you follow me, the 75 original down to 20. So that would be a reduction of 55. So you had request of 90, original 75, bringing it down to the 20, a cut of 55,000. So that should clarify what the numbers are. That 20,000 was an amount that would allow subsidizing the senior lunch program under a CRT situation. We're still proposing to do a subsidy to the senior lunch, but working with Gina, we've looked at a variety of ways to make this fit. Be increases in prices, working with the vendor, and we actually have a new grant coming our way that will help us with the paper supplies. So there was a combination of efforts and a lot of work, and as town manager said, this is something that's presented for the council that we've worked on. So I hope that clarified a bit on that. Did you want to talk about the position?
Okay, getting back to the page 150, or actually whatever, if you're following along. I just want to get down to the we had an increase of 38.5% in the salary, total line item for salaries. That was because of the part-timer running and being converted to full-time, and we have 2 part-time positions down there now. Beyond that, there really isn't much left in this budget. We're still trying to figure out the copier telephone allocations. This is the second year, so we really don't have a trend yet. We're still struggling with trying to try to estimate those costs in each department. And overall, like I said, about a 0.8% reduction in this particular budget. Questions?
I had a question. So going back to the senior lunches, so I know internally you've talked about certain changes so the lunch will stay intact. Are there any numbers we need to adjust in our budget so we know what we're looking at, or?
No, actually not. Not within the budget. I think within the page, we may look at, for example, the senior activities. Some of these larger lunch functions have activities, so we'll see a portion of that coming from that line of senior activity, $21,750, which we've talked about. But the page itself, no need to increase the that senior program. Everything would be fee for services and some programs that Gina identified.
And sponsorships.
Right, so it'd be more on the revenue side then.
Pardon me?
More, so there'll be some change on the revenue side to,
It's
So
on
the
the,
net gets down.
it's on the revenue side of special revenue, not general fund.
Right.
So at this point, what we're proposing has no effect on the manager's proposed budget.
So I have a few questions, actually, more than a few. So I'm going to start with from the lady, who brought up, because I'm such a son of my parents that I want to tackle my parents' questions first. So a very straightforward question. What is the cost of the lunch, as the lady from the audience asked?
Well, obviously, it's a moving number because you don't see the same item on the menu day to day. They have special events involved as well. Obviously, you've seen the rates. If you're following what the program does, the rates for special events are higher. But a regular, if we had to make a ballpark right now, because working with the vendor, we have got between $8 to $9 for the meal. We've also looking at right now approximately $2 per meal in paper materials, and we're expecting that the grant that we're working on will relieve a lot of that.
All right, so the next question is, what is the cost of the special event lunches? Is that the same or higher?
Oh, it's higher. It's higher, and you'll see proposal to increase it as well. I think it, at this point was $10, should be looking at it at 12. There's variations between resident and non-resident, so.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. And I have some questions, Mona. Like, I think maybe you can answer them most probably, but if not, Ms. Marino can answer them. How many members today we have at the senior center?
I would not know for today.
Today, as in, tell me 3 months ago. That's fine.
Yeah, I think in her report.
It's stated, estimated 1,800.
Why is that an estimate?
Yeah, when was that estimate?
Don't we have an
It changes daily because people are coming in.
Yeah, so as of whatever date you choose, you can give me a number. That does not need to be an estimate. It can be an exact number.
Well, personally, I won't have that number to you right now. I don't look that closely at the memberships. I mean, if you're concerned about the estimates, we did those performance measures so we could track to give you a sense, and every department would have actuals of the prior year, estimate of the current, and projected of the following. So just so you'll know that the estimate is something that you'll see as a trend through every department. And as far as the membership today, if you want to.
Yeah,
Maybe just to clear it up, right? So in order to have the lunch, right, you have to be a member of the community center, correct?
There's a different rate for the non-members.
No, but
It's
not the
switching
rates or
resident.
anything, but just like,
yeah.
just to, in order to go in there and have lunch, because I know, because I sign up for lunches. So to go in there, you have to be a member. I think you sign up through whatever Parks and Rec or Community Center, right? So
Yes.
that number we probably have in a computer somewhere, right?
yes.
And is that, I guess that's your
where I'm
question,
going
is
with
that
this.
1,800 listed in the computer for 20? I think that's your question.
That's
right?
my question. I'm not even worried about the cost at this point. I'm just trying to get a basic sense of how many members we got, how many are out-of-towners, how many are in town, right? And
Yeah.
so let's start there.
Did you, okay, so as for their actual membership, I don't have their software in front of me.
Does
I
Ms.
would
Marino, Ms. Marino might know, you think?
imagine- She may, but I don't know if we wanted us to continue and then go have her up for the questions.
Yeah, I have a list of questions, so I don't know, like, I can keep going. I can keep the asterisk on this, and then we can keep going.
Okay.
Yeah,
As
okay.
far as the resident, non-resident, when we were doing our projections, it is perhaps a 30% non-resident versus 70%.
30%.
And that's based on a review of past 9 months.
30%
approximately.
non-resident, Mona?
Correct.
Thank you. All right.
You have this.
So
My next question is, are these dues which non-members pay, are they due every year? When does this membership renew for out-of-towners?
They're annual memberships, and they stagger depending on when they pay.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what is the process of communicating that they are owed the membership dues, these out-of-towners?
They have the software program?
Yeah, they are using the online software program. So whether they're using reminder notes or text messages,
Can
it's more
you give
program.
me, for the last 2 years, and I don't expect it to be available right away, but if you can give me a trend on last 3 years of renewals for non-residents?
Just non-residents.
Just non-residents.
Sure, we'll look at it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We'll have that for the next.
Absolutely. And then, so how many, can you also tell me like how many members are active members? By that, what I mean is they come at least once a week. I made that definition up myself. If you think that constitutes active, go with me. Otherwise, you can make it 3 days a week. It's up to you. But I made it 1 day a week. Can you give me that estimate at some point?
I'm writing them down. Go
All right,
ahead.
awesome. All right. The next question I have on the same lines is, who are the super active members, like who come every day or 3 to 4 times a week? Do we have we are trying to be, the reason I'm asking all these questions, Mona, is we are trying to be a data-oriented town, and I think these are basic metrics which we should be having for any program, not just this. I'm just taking the opportunity and using this opportunity to actually collect these for other programs as well, but we can start here.
Yeah, no, understood. And I think this program, since Gina has gotten involved and is using this new online system, I think it may have been more manual in the
Sure.
past. She and one of her staff members, especially recently as we're looking at the prices and sitting together, we've done, I think, a very good job at going in the direction that you're looking at, which is to be a more online. It's great to see them using the software where it had been more of a manual system. So history of data is relatively new to the program, but they are on top of it, and she's really costing out not just this lunch program, but all the programs.
Yeah.
Parks using the same software, they have history of it, great detail, it's a good software.
Yeah, that's great. And my intention here is to keep this program robust so that we can actually build on this, as some of the members of the community mentioned, and we should be able to look at and be transparent about this number so that actually we can sustain this program for the long run. Now, I have other questions. So, sorry, I don't want to hog all the time. I have 2 pages of questions. If somebody else has questions, please jump. But I'm happy to yield my time in the.
Okay, how about we give you 3 more, and then we'll circle.
Okay, so let's go to Compass. How many printings of Compass we do?
I don't know.
Every 2 months, as I understand. Yeah,
Just 2.
Every 2 months.
every 2 months. Yes,
You're looking like the actual number?
actual number of printings. Yes. And then my related question is, how many are emailed versus mailed through snail mail?
Is this one of I'm allowed to write it down and get back to you?
Absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely.
We'll
I don't
work
expect
on
you
it.
to answer right away, but I'm put it on the record so
That's
that we can
good.
get an answer. Okay, so how many are emailed? My concern there is, again, I will always give you a reason why I'm asking these questions. How many of these are cross-referenced by Ms. Marino or the office to look for if we are emailing a spouse and then printing the same thing out and sending in a snail mail to the same household? Do we have a cross-reference for that number?
So are we sending them to the members, or are we sending them to the household?
Right.
Exactly. So you are.
Right.
So me, for example, let's say me and my wife were both members. I was getting the snail mail because my name was on the list, and she was getting an email, right? And as I understand, these Compass programs are also printed and put out in the lobby. I want the number for that as well.
Okay. Good.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And again, like this is, again, like so that we are transparent about like how do we communicate today? Can we communicate better with our community here? And again, like I know like this program is new, so I think we can use some of this rigor around measuring this program. So next question I have is related, so I think you can put it in the same bucket, but it's about the lunch calendar. I have seen like the lunch calendar is printed like every month as well. Not that I visit the center frequently. I would love to. They have some great programs there, as everybody agrees. But what I've seen from my limited exposure.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Are you sure you want to see us?
Yeah, we have a lot of departments to cover tonight. We'll bring it back.
So, Mona, on the related item, the lunch calendar, right?
Yeah.
If we can get a figure for that as well, just to make sure that, again, like we're spending the money at the right places. Obviously, lunch is near and dear to every one of us, and so I want to make sure that we are actually spending these dollars wisely in places we actually, make a difference. So that's my, again, like I'm giving you context, not to like waste everybody's time. That's my intention here. So next question I have is about special events. I already asked that question about, taking a leaf out of one of our audiences here about the cost of the special lunch. I also want to know what percentage of that money is coming from sponsors.
Let's see if I can give a quick look at it. I would say at this point, there is a small percentage from sponsors, but I know, again, from talking with Gina Marino, that this is something that we're going to work on. We've noticed that there are, and it's similar to what you're saying, is there are different aspects of the program that are coming into one unit, and we're going to look at addressing it as a whole rather than special events. This is the event, and these are the fees and covering the cost. Special events should be umbrellaed under the senior lunch program as a whole. Sponsorships, which would tend to be running in its own category, now can be married up with the lunch program. So it required us looking at the way the activities were reviewed individually, kind of in their own little silos, and then bringing those that are related together. And I think that's what helped us identify that there is ability to cover the program. So
Yeah, and that's
it is
fantastic.
separated, but it would be separated for just all programs.
No, I think that's fantastic. We should have a public-private partnership, again, to the same idea of like making this program as robust we can. Again, like there were some ideas about like having a fund and like funding and investing that money, like, something similar in that vein. And a public-private partnership is a great idea for this. By the way, so I know like going forward you have this plan. Will Ms. Marino know what is the number today, the ballpark number at least?
For your the
For the sponsorship, yes.
For the sponsorship. Just a comment. With our new partnership with the Middlesex Chamber of Commerce, we have more access to a wider base of sponsors, and Gina Marino has been attending these Middlesex Chamber for networking, so that's part of our plan, to bring those people in, try to get more sponsorship in,
Of
this
course.
year and going forward.
Awesome. So hopefully we'll see some progress, but if you can provide me the number for this year as of whatever day you choose in 2023.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what is your question?
The sponsorship number.
The number, not the amount.
The amount,
Dollar
number of dollars we get from sponsors.
I have.
Yeah. Sorry,
have it written
I was
down,
not
I should
clear.
say.
I'm using the number and the dollar number kind of, you know.
Okay.
So my last question, I think it is the last one, but I'm cutting it. I'm looking at you, Chris. You're looking at me like, hey, you got to wrap up. I'm just kidding.
Start playing the music.
The Jeopardy.
Okay. So, hey, one other question I have related, and Ms. Marino can probably answer this. What is the process today of having a special event like a Cinco de Mayo or Elvis event, right? Because as far as I remember, and Ms. Marino can correct me, we didn't have a Diwali holiday celebration at the center for the last 2 years. So I was just wondering, because we have a pretty large population, as is evident from everybody talking about the cricket field, and I find it a little bit, I find it like remiss on our part, and which can be construed as like culturally a little insensitive to not have that event at the senior center when we have such a large population of people of Indian and South Asian heritage. So maybe just something from perspective of like how we have special events. What is the process? What is the framework? What we decide to do, what we decide to host versus what we not decide to host. I think that will be good from a perspective of the town council and town manager. If you can, have a policy for organizing such events, I think that would be wonderful. I don't want to be, I'm the last person who wants to have a bureaucratic, paperwork flowing around and make this all about like, emails and paperwork. But I think we do need a process and we do need a framework to have these events, town-sponsored events, if you will. So those were my questions. Thank you for bearing with me. And
Welcome.
I'm using a lot of paper to write these down.
I have a question. You talked about, I think, the ARPA grant. Could you maybe explain a little bit more some of the things that we got to report at the senior liaison? If you can maybe explain a little bit more about what some of those things will be and how they may help.
Just pop in. Yeah, there is ARPA money available to senior centers to do a number of different programs and other things. We have been allocated $62,000 of grant money to utilize for our senior center, whether it's programs or, infrastructure. Mona can give you the numbers and also the details of what we are looking at to do with Gina's program.
So, yes, so Gina and I are working on this. It's $62,583 to be exact. It's an entitlement for each town that has a senior center. What it requires is us to prepare a budget and a plan. It has to be COVID related, and COVID in this particular case, as we may remember, there was a time where a lot of the activities were closed. We didn't have activities where we could come together. So having an activity such as a lunch program where you can bring people together for social purposes would fit into this. So we've looked at and are costing out, hopefully we'll get our budget within the next week, is looking at having, for example, a dishwasher. That's the sanitizing and keeping everything obviously very nice and clean, but what that allows us to do is that $1.50, if anyone was listening when I was giving you the price, that was making that cost of the meal so expensive. If we could do the commercial dishwasher and get plates and some nice silverware, if you want the family meal, it'll feel like a family meal. The commercial heating tray, so when the food comes in, if it's a little bit cool, you can keep it cooled. or keep it warmed. Sorry, I don't want to keep it cool. So keep that warm. Looking at relocating the small dishwasher. We can put it near the coffee shop. That requires some work in that coffee shop area. Probably have to do a little construction and opening walls, but that way you can have coffee mugs at the coffee bar. So those are the type of things that we're putting into the grant. There should be some additional available to do things, as you had mentioned, like some of these special events, those where you want to do more special activities and recognizing. So if there's funds available, we put it aside for that. It should be these one-time expenses. And we have some good plans, and we still have to iron out the final details and get estimates in. So,
And presumably, when those improvements are made, there would be ongoing savings because we'd be basically taking $2-3 out of the food budget.
Exactly.
exactly right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And is there any restrictions to the senior center holding some fundraisers to help with maybe some of the special activities?
None at all.
None at all? Just as one of your questions, not really one of your questions, but one of your topics, out-of-town members do pay more for activities and for lunch, so I don't know. If
I'm aware of that. I just want the numbers. I'm aware of that.
I just
Thank
didn't
you.
know that. I
Yeah.
just didn't know if you.
Of course, I'm aware of that.
Yep. That's all the questions I have right now.
I just have a quick question. So in I think at the Compass, yes, where we have like there's sections with like business cards or people's businesses. Do they pay to like an
For
advertising fee
advertising fee, yeah.
to be in that? Okay.
And Mona, like if that number you're going to bring for the sponsorship, will that include that? Just to piggyback on Mayor's question there. If you
We'd
can
like-
separate
yes,
it out,
If it's separated, but,
Thank
yeah.
Yep. If I may? Yeah, but is that my turn? Just circling back to the lunch issue. And maybe this is primarily a messaging issue rather than substantive, but I just want to nail this down. So as we look at the budget page as presented, and apparently it's unchanged as shown on the town website, we're still showing in black and white here $20,000 for food, which reflects the original cut. But as I understand it, that doesn't mean that a total of $20,000 is expected to be spent on food. That's going to be supplemented by other things that are not reflected here, such as special programs, user fees, sponsorships, et cetera. Do I have that correct?
So the 20,000 would remain in this budget. All those fees and so forth are in the special revenue fund, which you don't see on here. So this would remain. And anything else we're talking about is fee-for-service special revenues, not in the general budget at all.
So I guess circling back to messaging then. So what I think is problematic going forward is that this is still the document that everyone's going to be looking at. And that explanation, that backstory is nowhere to be seen here. Well, people will look at this and they're going to see, oh my God, we're being cut from 75,000 to 20,000, and it's just going to perpetuate, this great concern, a lot of anguish for people. Is there a way to add some explanation here to this so that people understand that this 20,000 is not the whole pot, that the reference needs to be made to other sources as a way of conveying to people that this, looks like a 75% cut is not really what's happening here.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, the 75,000 was never the full program either. That was still a subsidy. The majority of the program was always run through special revenue, fee for service.
Okay. So, I mean,
Yes, definitely in that narrative area, we can put that for clarification.
either that or if there's another link or something, another drop-down box or something. I mean, we have this wonderful new tool here that allows us to kind of drill down a little bit. This seems to be a line item that cries out for that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Just a few questions. I'm glad you touched on the potential for the commercial dishwasher, because when I was hearing about the meal costs, 20% of that being paper that you almost immediately throw away, it's a cost, but it's also from an environmental standpoint not where we want to be going. Maybe there's something that we can do. I'm not sure how much success we'll have pursuing that ARPA grant, or if there might be something I don't know if there's energy efficiency grant, but certainly there's an environmental footprint there as well. And, I would hope that folks do realize that, it's not our intention to cut back on this amenity. We're all faced with the challenge that seniors pay taxes to, and the balance of when we're trying to have as lean a budget as possible in a pretty difficult year, and looking out for the wallets of folks, especially those on fixed incomes. But having said that, I think the council has also heard the response from the public on the importance of this amenity and different programs to attract people to this amenity that the public invested quite a bit in. I did want to ask along the lines of that, is there anything in terms of, like right now everything's new and it's great, but in terms of replenishing furniture, equipment, things that break down, is that come out of like a general fund for the whole town hall, or do we need to save a little bit each year to replenish it? Otherwise, it's a really big bill, and then we can't pay it, and then stuff gets run down.
Yeah, that's built into the facilities
Okay.
budget, and also depending on the cost of what we need to do in the capital improvement budget also.
Okay, that's very good. And then also just kind of building off of Bill's last questions, the proposed item assumed with that 20,000, it assumed the onboarding of a CRT. It sounds like where we stand right now, that is not something we intend on moving forward with. Is that an accurate thing to say? Because I think that was a concern about not just the money going out, but food coming in.
That would be the recommendation to the town council.
And the council will decide that
Yes.
at budget time. Okay. Is there any sort of lead time? I don't know if there's a contract in place with the existing vendor or other ones. Like, is there any sort of time frame, or does it all line up just with whatever we approve at the budget?
No, I think we're flexible.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we're at the start of a program here, and as some other comments mentioned, we're kind of building off something new. We're collecting data. Is there a best practice or a program that other towns might use that would allow folks to maybe pay more if they're a working senior or a guest? If I go with my mom to the center, I don't mind paying more. It's something that helps make that more easily tracked, but is also, not something where for folks who need help, they feel put off from asking. It seems like maybe I don't even know the right way of stating it. Maybe it's something where when someone signs up for their lunch and they call ahead, you ask them if they want to pay the friend of the senior center rate, where they kick a little bit more to contribute to the program. There's probably some model like that other people have used.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have that flexibility. And if there is a best practice, I think Gina either is already doing it or will find one.
Because that might be, and it might be something where that requires some sort of startup money for infrastructure. Would be good to just know about that if it's a key system. I mean, I don't think we want it to be too onerous, but it might be something where people can just put in their phone number. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of handling it, and hopefully that's a way that we can continue the viability of the program. That was just a few thoughts on that. Thank you.
I do think I know that I have gone to some senior centers as well to check things out. And a lot of them use a computerized system that's super, super simple, where you go in and they have a bunch of monitors and you have your fob like you would at work, right? And you swipe it, and then it automatically tells you that you're there for your program. So now you're measuring the impact on the community of that program by how many people are there right on that day. And then are they going to other activities that are happening that day? And then also what they're paying for lunch, right? So it's kind of like something you would do at the schools, right? Where, you're going to sign up for maybe a reduced lunch rate. And so all of that, you don't have to bother with any of that at the door, right? Or on the phone. It's all set up, especially if you're going to have an annual membership, right? It should just all be nice and clear. And then we know, okay, this is really working, and we're actually serving people, who have various needs, and just so it's measurable.
It's measurable, and also
I think is what you're kind of.
It's a good,
right.
Yeah. It's a good experience, from the perspective of the person who is coming to the senior center. Like it's not like something. It brings confidence into like how we are spending our dollars and how we're managing this program, right? So that these kind of issues don't become, to your point, Chris, become like kind of through like, kind of like a lack of trust in the process become big, and then we have a community which is worried about impacting this program, which is near and dear to everyone. So I think it's just the process of building trust starts at like we knowing what we are doing, right? And that translates into the experience the person has at the door. To Mayor's point, if anything, I will say one thing on this, like last thing, if anything, like the pandemic has told us, like we need to take care of each other, and that's I think something like which we learned like very early, and it's a kind of a ongoing lesson, right? So my intention, and I think the intention of this council, as I'm hearing from that end to this end, I think the intention of this council is to make this program more sustainable, more robust, if anything. And lunch is just one component of that, right? We need this program to be sustainable in overall. And for that, we should look at all parts of this program, not just the lunch element, right, which takes the focus. So I think we are doing what we are supposed to do here, and I think I cannot agree more with my colleagues here that we need to make this program more sustainable and more robust, and some of the things we can do, like public-private partnerships and things of that nature are a really good start.
Yeah. And you may have noticed, I don't know if the lunch program, where there used to be, pay at the door type of situation, and you may have noticed that Gina she's making changes leaps and bounds ahead of us with that, and now they're not doing that pay at the door, that awkward moment, everything, is
Right.
pay in advance. So as you were saying, if you had a circumstance, nobody would know, what the amount is that you're paying necessarily. And she's got a good program she's promoting as well with the gifts of gratitude. So if you were somebody that just wanted to donate, this was your month, that it was your birthday, you want to put something toward it, $100 into the lunch program. That's where you can help out your friends or anyone else. So she's got some great ideas going. I think this has been a motivation to put our heads together, and I think you'll be really impressed, if you're not already.
Well, I am the kind of person like who is impressed, but I want to improve on things. So, I mean, call it a character flaw, but.
And if I may, there already is a program where people can make personal donations, and expanding on that, so
Yeah.
that is going on.
Yeah, Mimi and I sat in on the senior liaison chair's senior liaison meeting, and we found out from our director that this program is extremely professional and sensitive to all. So you have resident members, non-resident members. You have fortunate members and less fortunate members. Nobody gets turned away, and the director is doing a marvelous job of managing that, and folks have the opportunity. A really neat program is the Gifts of Gratitude, which people do give gifts of gratitude, and have the ability to pay forward their lunch, right? And the lunch is, as it's been described to us, is no longer just a lunch, right? It's a program. There's all kinds of presentations being given, so it's no longer just the holiday dinner or the Thanksgiving lunch. It's the lunch with a presentation and other social activities connected to it. So it's taking on a life of its own, and I'm quite confident that our director has got her finger on the pulse of how to run that and eke out the monies that we need to keep it going.
One quick statement here. I only have 19 questions.
And the PowerPoint?
And the PowerPoint. Silliness aside, I think there's some phenomenal points here, but I think transparency, as a few have already alluded to here, is critical. And it'd be great if we can leverage the data or some structure, the value add on the website. I think I know a lot of us have access to it. I know some do not, but I think if we can get the message out to the majority, that will still populate, and it'll help have the right message out there of the good that's happening and the structure that's happening and the control that's in place through metrics.
I just want to say that that's a phenomenal idea. And I know that some of the seniors who have, come to speak with me have said it's such an incredible program. It really ought to be an example for other municipalities in the state of Connecticut. And we never highlight that, right? And so to put that information on the website is a great way to highlight that. We're going to move on to subsection B, the minibus services.
Forgot how to drive.
There are really no major changes here. Contractual salaries, a little bit of overtime, no change in that category. It's really, the motor fuels and lubricants and contractual salary. Pretty boring.
Any questions on any of those?
Uh,
We're on minibus.
Minibus.
Do we still just, in terms of the replenishment schedule of the minibuses itself, I think we had been on, at least I remember back when I was on finance, we had a certain number of each year that would go to a new minibus. Is that in capital, or is that part of this, or are we just good on buses?
Yeah, it would be in capital, and it is not in for this year. So we were doing like a $20,000, $25,000 installment toward the purchase, about $60,000. So we don't have anything in place for this year. So that would mean in the next 2 or 3 years, we should be covering for that if the intention is to do another purchase.
And our bus fleet, I think is, some of them are relatively new. How is the shape of the fleet? When do we think we're going to have to do our next bus purchase?
I think Rick felt comfortable in not having it in this year and then going forward for the 23, 24. So.
Thanks.
Mona, is this part of the senior services budget, right? Like, where does it come under, like the human services or the senior services? I know they might be shared, the services themselves.
They do share the services, but it comes under the senior center.
And the personnel who manage this come under the senior services?
Yes, Gina and her people.
Okay, I was confused because there's one full-time employee, there's a one part-time employee, right? Which is in the budget for senior services. Where does the bus services fall then?
Part-time.
But do they come under Ms. Marino?
They have full-time drivers and a part-time administrative, taking, reservations and following up on.
And where does that line item go for the personnel for those?
It's in the minibus.
On this particular page for minibus?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I missed that. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it, but.
If you go down.
Mona, can you just
That's
point
fine,
it out
Mona.
on the
Thank you.
screen?
We'll figure it out.
No, that's okay.
So on this line, I don't have a screen down anymore, but on this line here where I'm going, these are the full-time salaries for the bus drivers. And in the part-time, this is the individual that's taking the phone calls and making the connections.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, we're going to move on to general government, beginning with the assessor.
Hold on, I have to get up here. Oh, there he is.
Major changes for the assessor's department. There is a vacant position that has been frozen, as was mentioned for the tax department. The proposal is to hire one full-time professional to float between the two. The particular salary for that position is put in the tax collector office, so you'll see a decrease in the full-time salary line. And the other The other mention is the almost 12% reduction in that budget, primarily due to the removal of that position out of that budget. Another, if you go down to the technology software line, 5343, you'll see an 18% or 17.9% decrease in that item. And that is due to switching over our Tyler system to a different vendor called Equality. Cost reduction, it was a regional bid, so we had a reduction in cost for that vendor. So overall, there was 11.7% reduction in the assessor's budget.
So question, this upcoming, during the upcoming budget year is going to be a revaluation, correct? So are there additional expenses incurred as a result of people we need on the ground, and that's factored into this already, or how does that all play out?
In the CIP.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find on the
It's in the
CIP budget
the,
that every year we have a dollar amount that's put into CIP. It's actually, I think, a $15,000 increase because we had brought forward the bid for the group that'll be doing that work. So that's where the expenses are coming from there. So it's a CIP line actually coded and referred to as revaluation. So we spread it over a 3-year period.
25,000 last year.
Right, and now we're at 40.
We did 25,000 last year, and we added 15 this year for the reval.
So could you elaborate a little bit on, is that for software or personnel, consultants to come in and assist with the reval?
That would be for software, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's for the reval
Software.
software.
So
And
I guess the concern looking at the budget is you're not filling a position within the department and it's a year of revaluation.
right.
And how do we anticipate getting through that down a person?
That position that has been vacated is a administrative technical.
Yeah, it's like a front office clerical
it's more of a-
appointments and that type. So no doubt there would be some impact. I imagine, I would have to say on behalf of the assessor's office, this is shared with the tax collector. If we were going to fund that, probably both offices would rest much easier, but they are aware of the consolidation. So this isn't the person going out and doing the site visits. This is the in the office phone calls, appointments, billing, so forth.
I guess my thought process on this, and, we're always up against tight budgets and we have to pick items that we got to remove from a budget, but there's also a cause and effect of removing certain items from the budget and running too lean. And, if we have more tax appeals because our revals aren't done timely, there could be an increase in cost. If we have just more appeals or questions or inquiries to why things went up because we're anticipating, an increase in property values, we just got to make sure we're not being short-sighted in the approach in one line item. We're going to take a hit somewhere else in the budget to make sure the job is. So it's a little concerning on a reval year to really be hitting one department that is going to be in its peak year. The option is maybe we look in consultant for the project if that were part-time, but that's the determination. I don't know what's available.
Point taken. Just, again, the position that is vacant would not be a field person going out doing the actual, appraisals. It's the office.
Right, but the point being, if you don't fill the office spot, that means somebody has to be able to handle that.
Right,
That could be the person in the field, right? You got to backfill somehow.
Well, that's why we're sharing this position. But, yeah, you're right. It is, it's a proposal,
Yep.
so, to take under consideration.
Or I guess, so this is kind of what he kind of has to bear, but, so how are we factoring in the additional personnel? Because you said the CIP was just for software, correct?
Yeah.
So let's forget about the person that you're not replacing. How, like, if there wasn't a reval year, would this be even lower, or did you factor in additional personnel, or do we just absorb it within the people we have here, or just maybe talk a little bit about how that all works?
It would be, we would absorb it as is. It would be probably a little easier next year, non-reval year, to have this floater to go between both departments. Both departments have been working together for years, and they each know each other's schedule. They know their busy times of year. This person could easily just sit in the office and do what they need to do in the assessor's office during time periods when the assessor and his staff are out in the field doing what they need to do. And while the tax office takes care of their business, they're right next to each other, as you know. They can just walk right across the aisle and staff that meeting, staff that department. We sat down with both, and both our department heads are not really happy, but they understand, and they indicated that they could struggle through this. So therefore, I proposed a floating position.
Question on the technology side of it. Is some of that software, are we already protected for the cyber theft or of title documents and things like that? That's up to snuff and good?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Any software that's coming onto our servers are going to be up to snuff through our IT department.
Yeah, John Nowakowski will not allow anything to be updated without it being up to snuff with the cybersecurity.
Following up on the question regarding the software, so it's every year we put a certain amount towards that software to defray the cost of paying one large bill during the reval year. Is that because we only need that software intensively during the reval, or I guess it seems is that it seems like that number's been static for a while. Like, are we going out to bid for the software, or do we need to have that to talk to our systems that we have?
Yeah. Actually, we did go out to bid. So you can see in the past years we had on that CIP line was about 20 to 25,000. This year it's 40. So we did go out to bid, and the prices do change. So you'll see that in the CIP line that there's an increase for that.
So that's the
And the bid went out, and the group has already been identified.
Thanks.
Are we moving on to the next department, or questions are all set on okay.
Ready?
Yep, ready to move.
Public safety.
Public safety.
Now we go on to an easy budget. Police, public safety.
Public safety.
Oh, I'll have to update my page. This is Police Chief Mike Custer. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
Police admin?
Yep, police admin. As you all know, we have an interim chief, Brian Klett, and we all know. So if you go line item, the salary items again reflect the contractual obligations, including overtime. We do see some savings in the chief line item also due to the retirement for this year anyway of Chief Custer. As you can see, you go down there were a lot of zeros, 0% increases in this budget. Again, the photocopier issue, it still creeps up, as I said, in every budget. We're still trying to get a trend on that as far as the usage.
I'm assuming that the lieutenants and now Chief Collette were active in setting up this budget and sending it up under Chief Custer?
Yes.
And
yes,
also reviewed again by interim Chief Klett.
And does this assume we maintain current things as they are, or does it take into account hiring of a permanent chief, any adjustments that might take place in terms of salary and other promotions from within to backfill? If we're allowed to talk about those things, I don't know.
And say, and because of the timing and that the proposed budget came, so at this point, it would reflect no change on the admin side, but it looks more as if it were an internal change, and you'll see a reduction on investigation. So that would assume that, obviously, as we were getting ready to just print the book, did not know what direction we'd go. So you'll see the staying stable on the admin side, but seeing a decrease on investigations. That doesn't mean that's where we'll be year-end for adoption, but at this point, there's a reduction on the investigation page.
And if that changes, it would be covered by contingency?
Correct.
Just specific to administration, though, with respect to the chief's position, this number was put out before the chief had announced his retirement, right?
Correct.
So it was premised on basically the salary structure we already had in place. This doesn't reflect whatever savings there may be from having the interim chief.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
So can I infer from that then that whatever happens with the chief position, assuming that there's going to be a bump up back up to at least close to what the previous chief was earning, that's kind of baked into this? That's correct?
Correct. There may be some impact if,
Okay. But for a period of time, I assume we're in a savings mode right now, I imagine.
yes.
We are.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I think we're down one patrol officer, right?
Yes, but there's a request, we're getting ahead of our pages, but there is a request for an SRO, so you'll come ahead one.
Oh, okay, so I just thought we were on salary, but, okay.
Just admin.
Admin salaries.
Admin right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Mona, 2 questions on this. Number one, I noticed fiscal year 2023 and proposed 2024, we're comfortable that there's no overtime built into this within the administration department?
Not on the admin, they would not be getting overtime.
Okay, so that, we're comfortable with that.
Mhm.
All right, and then the telephone is one of the other larger line items. Is that part of a multi-phase purchase of a phone system in prior years, or is that for cell service? What is that?
That would be on just the mobile cell phones. So this is the actual allocation of the Verizon bill for them, so.
And
I imagine if there were any new purchases, they would show up in that line as well.
okay. So that's strictly cell phone, not office phone or anything special towards dispatch? Or is that
No,
combined?
dispatch will be on the
the
next.
dispatch section.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that for physical phones as well as service in that line? Or just for service?
I'm sorry, I turned the page, I didn't hear you.
Is that just for cell service, or is that also at times having to buy the physical units for?
Oh, right, both,
Okay.
both.
No other questions on admin? So we'll move to records and communication.
I'm driving. Okay.
There are major changes, increase in radio contract, decrease in contractual services, overall a 1.8% increase versus last year. Again, contractual for salaries. Again, increase in some of the maintenance line items for excuse me. God, apologize for that. It's if you have any, it's not a real
Do you want me to? I was just going to point out on that radio service line for that increase that we did have a contract in the prior year, and as we were planning to budget for that, we were able to get a lower rate. So at this point, this is going to recognize the increase for next year. So we had, I guess you'd say, a good deal for the prior year, but they had to come up and increase that according to service.
So is that, I mean, it's a 22% increase, so is that because our system is becoming outdated? Or is that just the cost of maintaining what we have?
The cost of maintaining.
Yeah.
As I said, we had an agreement for the 22-23 year that we're in, that actually came in at a lower rate, so you'd actually see it almost go at 11%, that because they were in agreement to the lower rate for 22-23. That gives the impression of a 22% increase.
The license reader technology lease is not in this section?
No, that's actually still in the ARPA funds. We had 3 years of ARPA, did the license plate reader. That's about $57,000 per year. So as long as the ARPA is available, so we'll have 2 years coming out of ARPA. Then on the so not next year, the following year, you'll see an increase of about $50,000 for those license plate reader system.
In which category? In records and communication?
It would most likely be in patrol, because that'd be more of a patrol service than a communication.
Uniform patrol?
I imagine we would let our
category, yeah.
Or one of our chiefs decide that.
Councilor Sullivan, it's almost like we would need ARPA is funding things, and we're gonna, there's things in this budget that won't, next year, you're like, where'd that come from? So it'll be interesting.
That's the concern, I know.
Yeah, I would
there a
actually
way
say
to
that is probably the only next year surprise. Where did that come from? Was that we had agreed to the 3-year contract with the license plate reader. Anything else, we've seen positions such as the human service, human service, youth service positions come in. So these are the only remaining item that is still being expended from ARPA. So I think, I don't have to get into my long-winded ARPA story, but as you know, we've got $980,000 available. That includes the remaining 2 payments for the license plate reader. Those are the only expenditures that are allowed after.
Any other questions on records and communication?
Yeah, I do. On the full-time salaries, and this is I think more of a staffing issue than a budgeting issue. So I note that in the current year we had budgeted about $850, but we're projected to spend only $750 in the current year. That suggests to me that, can you confirm one way or the other that we were understaffed, that there was one or 2 openings there that we're expecting to fill for the coming year?
So yes, they've had at least at varying times 2 vacancies through dispatch communications on this page.
Okay.
So ideally, these are putting budgeted amounts, assuming that all positions would be filled.
Right. And that's what I say, is that when we look at what's projected for the coming year, is a little over $850. It's only a 0.7% increase compared to what was budgeted last year, but it's a big bump from what we're actually spending this year, about $100,000.
Right.
So do we know if those positions have been filled, or are any of them still open?
Well, I think that's probably public safety knows better. I think our last discussion was there was 1 person identified, but not in the position yet, and one filled? Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And to that, there's looks like a corresponding change in overtime, where we are tracking about 50% above for the current year, and then we're seeing a slight dip over last year's proposed. That's because we have people who are currently doing extra time to fill in for those gaps.
That's exactly what you're saying.
And then I saw there was a decrease in the contractual services. Is there a happy story to tell there that someone should get credit for?
that a happy story you want to tell, Mona?
Someone got a good
Well,
deal?
I guess it's a happy story because we had the virtual simulator in there for the 22-23, which is not the cost that's in there for the next year. So I suppose just not repeating of one item.
Yeah.
All right, so it's something got paid off. It's not any
Correct.
reduction.
Yeah. That's a happy story.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no further questions on records and communications, Part B, we'll move to Part C of the police budget, support services. Any questions of support services?
This is
Investigation.
the investigation, the reallocation, perhaps, of the savings due to the police chief, right? Yeah. This section is where you'll find some reallocation due to the interim police chief, and we're doing some internal structure where we will add some additional administrative help to handle some of the administrative issues and tasks that were being performed by Lieutenant Collette. So,
Whose plate is now full?
whose plate is now
as
full?
chief,
Correct.
So it's got to flow down.
Yeah.
Hill?
There's a
It
shift.
flows down.
There's a shift.
Is it-
And we don't have concerns in terms of, or do we have concerns in terms of our capacity to backfill in investigations?
No. No. No.
No, it's something we had already discussed, so I agree with it.
Any other questions on support services? Looks like we're clear there. The last section, D, uniform patrol section of the budget.
Well, let's start from the, if you look under major changes, I'm going to start from the bottom. There's an increase in the TASER contract. You can see a decrease in fuel costs due to assigned vehicles. Increase in uniforms to be expected. In this, under uniform patrol is where you'll find the additional SRO officer proposed in the budget.
Let me go back up. Sorry about that. Okay, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Ray and Mona, about the rationale for the additional officer?
Globally, from an economic development point of view, from a marketing point of view, from a livability point of view, we have to have safe schools, correct? That's globally. And I like to put a priority on safe schools, as most of us do. At that point in time, SRO officer seemed to be a reasonable accommodation, considering the Board of Ed's outlook of having, SRO in every school. Subsequent to that proposal, we did meet with interim chief and Mona, and there was some research done. There are many towns in our area within, the capital region that do have SRO officers, but they also have many school security officers, which is it's a different animal than a SRO. So at this point, we're calling it an SRO, but I think during some of my presentations, I've added the SRO or school security proposal.
So how many SROs we have
2.5.
in patrol right now?
2.5?
Right.
Yeah, 2.5.
2.5. And they cover the schools on a rotating basis? How does that work?
One is assigned full-time,
High school,
to the high school. One floats,
right, and the other's the middle school.
the middle school.
So the high school and the middle school have their own, and the lost person, like, that's why you're calling it half? Is that
Right,
the
it's,
reason?
it's 4 hours that were allocated from the capital non-reoccurring fund to do it, and be a floater.
Sure. So in terms of like the duties of an SRO, right? I know there was a bill recently in the legislature about expanding on their role, or I should say, clarifying their role. Do you guys know if that's still out there? How does that impact us? Anything on that?
I'm not aware of that particular bill. I do know, and what I do know is rather limited. Yeah, I'm not a police officer, but SROs can be called out at any time if there's an emergency. They do,
Of course.
they're not there permanently, unless they're, if there's an emergency, they go, it's for coverage. So that might be an issue also, with the strict SRO model. And also they're doing other tasks while they're there, such as directing traffic in the morning for parking,
Sure.
But, and it kind of takes away, don't you think, the purpose of the SRO? And when they're out there in the parking lot all morning and in the afternoon, so.
Right.
So that's why the option of a school security personnel may be more beneficial, depending on, the model for that particular position.
But my concern is that we won't be able to have that officer, like from a school security officer standpoint. Now I'm kind of, moving from the SRO concept to this. Wouldn't we need it? And this is really, I don't know the answer. How would we distribute that one person into like several schools? Because we still have to deal with the SROs as they exist today. So even if you call it school security officer,
Right.
he's going to act like an SRO in the end, right? Because that third person is rotating still, right?
No.
Perhaps, we're also looking at SRO, whether you're doing an SRO at a full-time salary and perhaps 2 individual security people. So we wanted to make sure we had a
Okay.
placeholder of that dollar amount and be able to have it's like an offside discussion on what would be the best use of that SRO funding. So if, do you do?
Yeah,
security
I
officers?
know I'm talking about like more about operational stuff now. Like, so I'm just thinking like, if the town council here approves that position, how are you gonna, or the PD is gonna utilize that person, right? That's what I'm trying to get at. And does it solve some of the gaps that PD might think exist? So that's what I'm trying to get. I don't need to necessarily know exactly how they're going to be deployed at any given day or like what. But from a general standpoint, right? If you have additional SRO and you still have more than 3 schools, right? The way I'm understanding it, you're still rotating people, right? I mean, you have 3 SROs
4 schools.
and you have more than 3 schools.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I'm going basics.
They're not exclusive.
They're not exclusive. Thank you.
No.
I would leave that up to the chief, as far as how they want to use the chief in combination with the Board of Ed and how they want to structure this.
So what I'm trying to get at is, yes, absolutely, you should be able to figure that out. What I'm trying to get at is, does it solve that need, that gap which exists today? That's what I want to hear. Like, I mean, you can talk about it, or the chief can talk about it, but I just want to make sure I get a good sense of like how that person is going to be utilized, and does it fill like a current gap in our system, right? That's all I'm concerned about. I'm fully behind funding an SRO if that makes our schools more, secure, for sure. I just want to make sure that we are doing it in a way where we actually take care of the problem and not just do it because, the Board of Ed is asking for it.
I believe the The chief is comfortable with coverage at this point, but I don't think the Board of Ed is comfortable at this point.
Is that right?
That's.
I don't know if
the word I'm getting.
Chief Flett wants to talk about that.
I don't know if the chief wants to talk about that. Would you like to hear from the chief?
Yes,
on
please,
this,
if
on
I
this
can.
question? Sure.
Yes,
And I do have a question directed towards the chief as well.
thank you.
Good evening. I'm Acting Chief Clef, for those who've not met in person to person. To answer your question, we feel we do not have a gap. We feel what we have currently is working for us. Our SOs are working very hard. They're here after hours regularly carrying cases that involve like DCF or protective services. So they're taking on a larger role than just providing school security. The addition to the SRO was brought into place, and from our point of view, if we are awarded that, and if that is approved, the distribution of that resource would be really a decision between the town, my office as well as the Board of Ed. So to answer, I couldn't tell you exactly the formula, but we are comfortable with the 2.5. And just to clarify, we have 2 certified SROs. They are trained, they have the certification, and they hold the badge on top of the badge that allows them to perform that SRO function. This half officer really is being covered by overtime, providing security services and filling in where they can. But if we have a juvenile case, a juvenile investigation, a matter of a criminal complaint, generally our 2 certified SROs are handling those and almost acting as if they're juvenile detectives. Whereas that half officer that we currently have is providing that extra layer of security that had filled that original gap that came on. We filled that last year, I believe, and it's been very effective. But if with an addition of a third, that's really an internal decision with the Board of Ed to what their needs really are. And I think their goal is probably to have an SRO in every school. I don't know if that's really feasible or fiscally responsible. But where we are today with 2.5, I can sleep very well knowing that we have the coverage and we're providing you the best level of service we can. But with a third, we could do even better.
Thank you. That helps.
Joey, so I still have a question to direct it right towards you, Chief. One of the things that's been continuing to happen is the property crime issue. And I know there's issues at the state level that prevent some of these things from being addressed. But as we're looking at our budget, are we providing the proper funding within the budget to allow you to do your job locally?
I believe so. The council has approved several new positions over the last 2 to 3 years that have really allowed us to perform at a different level that I've never seen in my 23 years. The amount of coverage we have allowed Chief Custer, of personnel, has allowed Chief Custer prior to his retirement to increase our minimum staffing. As early as a year and a half ago, we went from a minimum and increased that by 1 on the day and evening shift. I think the long-term plan would be to look to discuss even increasing it again, particularly on our busier hours, which tends to be like 1 to 9, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. But again, that's a matter of what we're working with right now. We have a contractual obligation through the union to our current schedule, and so we fit our personnel into that model. And if we do need to or want to increase within the footprint that we have, we'd have to look at maybe a more creative scheduling concept down the line. But right now, we have about 21 officers on the patrol line, currently a couple out on light duty, unfortunately. But what I can say is on an average Wednesday night, which is our heavy day, you can have 6, 7, even 8 cars out there. At a minimum, 4. But based on our schedule, you have four cars at a minimum, which is a single increase from years past, and it's been effective. But can we use more, particularly on some of those 1 to 9? I believe we can. It's just that's something that we have to kind of wait and see and feel it out with the number of people we have and what happens in this budget with some of the open positions that we have.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think another aspect that Councilor Greenspan would want to know is we still participate in the Hartford Task Force.
That's correct.
And you're still able to, under this budget, send our resource, our officer, 2, right?
So we have 2
Participate.
detectives assigned to
And
the
that's where we catch the ringleaders of the car theft and trespassing kind of teams that are hitting the town?
So kind of multifolded approach there. We have done some our own internal extra patrols by reassigning some of those extra patrol cars I've mentioned. We participate in some grant funding that we have from last year that expires in December, so we're using that and layering that in there. And in addition to that, we have 2 detectives assigned to the Hartford Task Force that go periodically, either funded by us or the grant, and participate with them in their enforcement efforts, which is stopping some of that crime reaching us.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Mimi. Go ahead.
I was going to say, kind of going back to the SRO issue, besides the SRO, are there other maybe infrastructure improvements that we should be making to make our schools even safer? Because in some of the incidents that have happened, even with an SRO, somebody comes in with an AR-15.
It's really a decision for the Board of Ed to make in evaluating their infrastructure. It's not something that would come out of our budget. 7, 8 years ago, I think we did a study here. We brought a company in that evaluated the school systems and how their buildings were designed and made some recommendations. But as far as the police department's concerned, I mean, that's not our purview to tell the Board of Ed how to construct or reconstruct their buildings or windows or man traps. But could there be more? I imagine there could be.
Okay, and I just want to publicly thank the police force with the task force. My son's car was stolen in Southington. It was found in New Britain. And within about 10 minutes of them finding the car, a police officer came to our house, a Rocky Hill police officer, to inform us that the car was found. So the task force works, and I want to publicly thank you for
been highly effective.
that
Thank
works.
Do we?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I had a question about SROs, but first I want to circle back to something. I think you said a few minutes ago. Did you say that Wednesday night is your busy night?
It's our heavy staffing night by our scheduling model. We
Okay.
built in a few years ago into our negotiation in our contract for schedule. We actually, no one in our department has Wednesdays off. So everyone's on the schedule somewhere on a Wednesday. So if you're driving around on a Wednesday, you're going to see almost every one of our officers in a 24-hour period. If you're
Stay out on
hours
Wednesday.
a night.
Okay, that's
Allows
not.
us to perform training functions and internal training virtually for free.
I see. Okay, because that's not driven by unusual spikes of criminal activity on Wednesdays or anything like that.
No. When the schedule was negotiated, we pushed for, we were finding previously that we were having trouble really coming up with it was costing us overtime to run our yearly training to the extent of, $20,000 a year just to bring people in on their days off and train. So what we do is our training coordinator, Lieutenant Morgan in the back, brings all of our in-service training on Wednesdays, and it's virtually cost-free.
Got it. Okay. So the question I was going to ask, just circling back to the SRO. So you talked about special certification for the 2 full-time SROs that we have. Can you just talk a little bit about what the subject matter is that they concentrate in to get that extra certification?
There's a national program that they go through. It's a national certification. What it is, it really trains them about the sensitivity of being in a school system, what kind of information that they could be exposed to that they can't share, how to interact and intervene in family matters, and effectively it's kind of like a juvenile-specific training course that teaches them about what they can and cannot do inside of a school, how they can go about interviewing a juvenile or not interviewing a juvenile, and how to best protect the rights of those juveniles if they are involved in a criminal event or if they're a victim of a crime.
I see. And so that, Ray was talking about SROs versus school security officers. So is that the distinction we're talking about? The SROs are those who have that special certification, but the school security officers are police officers, but who don't have that certification? Is that the distinction?
So that effectively where the course or direction of that position goes is yet to be determined. But what I can say is that the SRO is a sworn police officer with those credentials I just discussed with the federal certification, national certification, and continued training. If we're looking to move this into a security type of personnel, then that would be them being a sworn officer would be the first question I ask, because essentially what we'd be doing is adding an officer who would just be providing security services, right? But if we're looking to change the model and not have a sworn officer, we'd be looking at a civilian or a retired police officer to provide security services, but they wouldn't be able to intervene on those DCF cases and on those juvenile sexual assaults and all those other crimes. It's just a different view of the model. In our study shared with Mona was that we, from a school to police officer or SRO ratio, we are top of the charts. But when you look at the overall area with the study we conducted, we are very low on the totem pole when it comes down to total number of bodies for a combination of SROs non-sworn civilian security staff versus the number of schools. And Mona has that document. I'm sure she could share it with you. And I think what may, and don't, please stop me, I think what the discussion is that we may be able to leverage that money, if approved, in a more strategic way to get more services, more security at the school, while not necessarily having them be a sworn police officer. They be armed or a retired officer, something of that level, but that's a discussion we have not had yet.
You have the flexibility to do that?
It all depends on how, if approved, that gives us the opportunity to discuss that program. I think Ray alluded to, the manager alluded to that, if approved, that gives us the funds to discuss the program at that time.
Yeah, it would be a discussion with the Board of Ed, obviously.
Councilor Levine?
Yeah, just picking up on the subject. Is there a unintended or perhaps an intended benefit from the SROs in that they're with school-age children from younger children to teenagers on a day in, day out basis, kind of fostering a relationship between the police and all that whole part of the community? Is that something that you see a benefit from with these SROs, or is that overstating it a bit? Or
the instant benefit that I see is, as I run into, have made several friends who live here in town, have their own kids, the first question they ask is, do you know Officer Baker? Do you know Officer Raymond? So there is that connection of building those relationships with the school kids and our officers to know that they can come talk to them. Our SROs do a fantastic job being ahead of situations, having the intelligence and information about the students and their families and issues that are going on at home, and helps us better police that school or police the town if we have issues with kids. And they also can come to us for help if they need it. So that really is the big benefit of having us present on top of the security piece.
Right. So when you're talking about an SRO versus a school security officer, specifically, is that a big enough benefit that maybe tips the scale one way, or it's just another factor amongst others? Or
I think those relationships really become the same. It's just a matter of what their job task is. I think when you see someone there, whether it be in some sort of uniform, I'd imagine, you're building a relationship with someone who's there to protect you. And it's just that when it comes time for the police to put the badge on and serve as, getting into the law, those two SROs are our primary units on those cases. But if we were to bring in, and I think the model, I'm familiar with the town nearby, those security guards, whether armed or unarmed, become part of the school family and really an extension. Whether or not this position, if approved, falls into the police budget, in most towns it does not. Those positions fall into the Board of Ed, where they regulate their own security system. That's, again, a conversation for down the line. But I can say, listen, our current 2.5 structure has been working very well. I know there's some demands from Board of Ed and parents to want more, and every school should have one. I get that, and I don't write the checks. So I understand the hard decisions you have to make. But if we're able to develop a program with the Board of Ed, or they develop their program through these funds, or whatever concept we come up with, you're increasing the safety of the schools with those positions that come out of it.
Ray, you were...
Well, I was just going to change the topic to motor fuel, if we're ready.
I had other questions, but you can go to motor fuel if you want to go to motor fuel. It's under the police, right?
Yeah, actually, the chief is going to remain standing.
Sure.
I think I'm here longer than the fire chief, just for the record.
I think you
Yeah,
are.
you were. That's because you're special.
So was there, and thank you for coming and presenting, and congratulations as well. In terms of newer types of crime, things like, I know, like online scams, the cell phone messages that people will get that will then do like identity theft, and also things that might be more internet driven, particularly targeted at kids. Is that something that would fall under the jurisdiction of our PD, or is there a larger task force? And my other question is there any type of new tools or training that your team needs to help pursue those types of things?
They are difficult crimes to investigate. It's funny, we just come off talking about SROs, but a majority of our cyber crime, cyberbullying, is actually happening from our youngsters. Our SROs are pretty effective at nailing down the info, and if they have to trace that information through search warrant, et cetera, we're very trained in that. The problem we have with a lot of the cyber crime, it's not actually happening from within Connecticut or even from the United States. It's coming from overseas, nearly untraceable. And in particular, the scams that you see, they're very adept at making the calls. You've all gotten the call about the car warranty. You've all gotten the call about someone maybe being their family member locked up in God knows where. They're good at what they do, and what happens essentially is if that money changes hands and it's going overseas, it's nearly impossible, whether we're the FBI or CIA. You could give us the most training in the world. Once it's overseas, unfortunately, there's very little we can do unless we can tie it back to the United States, and that becomes a federal case or locally in Connecticut. But in most cases, it's just happening, coming in from international sources.
So there's not like we've got the model that seems like it works pretty well with our regional task force around the car thefts and the catalytic converters. Of course, those are physical things, harder to take out of state or out of the country. Is there anything like that that we participate in at a regional or with federal sources?
So, excuse me, there is a regional task force that is housed out of Manchester, I believe. It's either Manchester or Glastonbury. Used to kind of merge themselves. But out of Manchester, they do have a cyber team. We currently don't have anybody assigned there. Chief Custer had never made that decision or did not put anyone out there. It was brought to his attention, just the decision made probably just for resource purposes, not having enough people. It's something we can look at, but it's also a task force that we can lean on if and when we need help. They tend to be more helpful if you're involving yourself in their team. But right now I think I'm satisfied with the investigations that we can conduct. Generally that task force is doing more phone downloads on crimes happening here in town. In their town or those communities, but we get that same service through our state lab or other places like that. Just might take a little longer. So if we need to do a data dump on a phone, we submit it to the crime lab. It just takes a little longer to get back versus being on the task force.
Because I know that's one of the things that we hear from, particularly our seniors. You know, they might get a text message that says, "Oh, you got a weird, a charge here. Call us, give us your information, and we'll clear it." Maybe that's not something that we can do, but it would be helpful if we're covering folks for that, because I know that's something that makes people afraid of their phones.
Sure. I mean, if the senior would like a program or something, community event to come out and speak, I certainly have resources and some very, very well-spoken gentlemen and ladies who come out and present the message and keep pushing it. You see it in newspapers, see it on news, but how soon you forget and you make those mistakes. I mean, my mom called me, is this real? I'm like, hang up the phone. This is not real. Just please. You should be better than that, but sometimes you just get caught off guard.
Yeah. And I did have a note about SROs. I'm not sure that it's not really a question. Just in terms of doing research on this, I'm not sure if other folks saw, but the Journal of the American Medical Association, JMA, just published a very persuasive, exhaustive research document where they looked at 40 years of school shootings from 1980 to 2019. And now I know there's a lot of things that go under the umbrella of safety, and most of them are not school shootings. But when we hear from the public, when we hear from sometimes the Board of Ed, we need an SRO, it's usually after some sort of awful school shooting happens. Sometimes that happens, like one of the recent ones, someone just got access to the building through a side door. Other times, in what the JAMA found, was that of the 180 or so incidents they looked at, only 16 of those people who were mass shooters were 22 or older. 70 of them were current students. To me, that says that we need to make sure we've got an intervention model, and we should look at doing the right tool for the right job. 3 times as many people were killed in shootings where an armed officer was present, and they think that's because these young folks were feeling suicidal, and that was part of the way of what drew them to it, knowing they could be at an engagement. Not against SROs or the goods that they do, but if we think that's part of the problem, we might want to look at, with working with the Board of Ed, the right tool for the right job. If our police feel that we've got good coverage on the security side, we might work with them to see if they need more bolstering on early intervention, social work aspects, and make sure that we're approaching it from that angle as well. I know it sounds good to make sure that you've got an officer in your school. My oldest is now he just went to school this year, and it is alarming how fast you get used to things like an email on your phone that tells you, no, you had a soft lockdown at your school. Just a soft lockdown, don't worry about it. Or when your school calls you and you're not expecting it, wondering what that means. Oh, just somebody asking for the money for the bake sale. Okay, good this time. So I totally get where that puts people and why we ask feel as safe as possible. But I do think we should look at where can we use this most effectively. If we don't have a current gap, maybe there's a different way. If it's a new infrastructure study, if it's hardening up our infrastructure, if it's other positions. Because one of the pressures that we do have in this budget is we have added, in rightly, in many cases, more headcount. You know, the benefits accrue, retirement accrues, it impacts our budget. It is a big outlay. So we need to just make sure that we're doing it as effectively as possible, because everybody has to make their decisions about, you know, safety and cost and effectiveness and efficiency, and also be able to afford to live in town. So that's one of the challenges that we do face when we look at adding a new position if it's not a glaring urgent need. So just something to consider as we move forward.
Thank you. That's it for police?
No, I'd like to discuss the motor fuels and lubricant line item.
Oh, all right.
That is where the assigned versus take-home vehicle issue stands in that particular line item. And if you could see, as far as the fuel costs, you know, you're looking at maybe, you know, $25,000. Versus, you know, initially I had recommended that, you know, as a cost savings, you know, as we're going through. And, you know, as we progress through this budget process, you know, different scenarios pop up. Because of that particular take-home policy or benefit, or what's another word for benefit? Regardless, it was a great retention. It is a great retention tool. It's a great recruitment tool. And in fact, the vehicles are maintained better, you know, we have found out. And they're not constantly running, you know, 12, 8, 15, 16-hour shifts. So I'm looking at possibly, you know, maybe another alternative to, you know, take home versus assigned. And we've been talking briefly with the chief and Mona over the past, you know, few weeks to try to come up with a solution that maybe the town council would accept. At this point, I don't know if you have an issue with take home.
Is it in this number now?
It's in this number, yeah.
So take home is still part
No.
of this budget?
Take home is excluded. That was a
Excluded by the
$25,000.
17.8.
Correct.
Yeah, assigned is included in this, assigned versus take home.
Correct.
Any?
And I would probably recommend that maybe we readdress this maybe at the next budget session, so we can have further discussion, give you a clearer picture.
Do we know the impact on mileage? I think you mentioned that it's improved, but I'm not sure how far these are traveling, you know, if it's 10 miles, if it's 100.
We tend to, unfortunately, I have to review this probably in more detail than I care, but we do have it's over 40 officers. They range, I'd say you'd have like a good third of them within a 5-mile range. The next, you know, third would be, you know, between the 5 to the 13, and then a handful that are the greater than 25 miles. I think with the as town manager is saying, with the recruitment and retention, this is something that came about during the COVID time. We've hired, I'd say, over a dozen officers, you know, with this, you know, opportunity at hand. So I think we're from a budget point of view, we're presenting it as a possible reduction. But I think, as Alan had mentioned, you've got to look at some of the reductions versus the impact, and we're not sure if, as this reduction is necessarily going to gather the impact that we would hope, or would be, counterproductive.
Well, yeah, we're aware that officers are able to come online quicker, like
Correct.
immediately.
Right.
Yes.
And that's been a benefit to us over the past couple years.
Right.
Not to mention the retention and recruitment issue, which was a major issue 2 years ago, which I don't believe is an
if I
issue
may,
at this point.
You know, I heard the folks from the senior center talk about how, the senior center is a diamond in the rough, right? Well, I think they're better than that. Frankly, I think we are too. I think we're the Hope Diamond. All right, this police department and the benefits we've offered our staff, and there's a reason why we are fully staffed, and I can put a no vacancy sign above our door. Newington, Weathersfield, Cromwell, and Berlin, just met with their chiefs last week, have vacancies that you don't even want to know about, to the extent that Newington's overtime budget is almost $900,000. I've made presentations before about the effect of overtime and about retention, and sometimes those always outweigh the cost of how much we're saving in overtime versus the full-time employee. But you can see our numbers this year, how effective we were at reducing and cutting that overtime because we are staffed. And the number one reason that we are recruiting and retaining our people, the benefits, not necessarily in this order, but there's the restoration of that pension plan, this take-home car plan, and certainly very competitive salaries. And we thank you for everything you've done for our staff to get us there. But we want to remain the Hope Diamond. We want the officers to come visit us in the window, knock and ask if there's vacancies, and that happens daily. And we are so much ahead of our neighbors. I hate to brag. There's a reason we're full staff. There's a reason why people are staying. And there's a reason why people are asking daily when the next person's retiring because they want to come in. So I ask you to consider us to an opportunity to at least visit this program and visit the effect that it could have on us long term. And I don't think the number is significantly that dramatic. It has a major change or effect on our budget. But the benefit it provides us and as a recruitment tool, retention tool, you mentioned the response time. Last year we had a shooting, unfortunately, in town, and we had 4 officers on site ordered in from home within 20 minutes. That's incredible. So I'll just leave it there, but I'll let you guys work that out. But I can tell you it's a very, very, very valuable tool and a recruitment tool and retention tool that we've used successfully and will continue to do that if we keep the benefit.
And I'm sure there's restrictions on use of the squad car on personal time.
There is no personal use. It's portal to portal.
Yeah.
That's it. It's getting the car to your driveway. It's keeping all your equipment in that car, ready to roll at all times. And, I mentioned during COVID, we were trying to keep people from spreading germs to each other. We were pretty effective there. But if we were to ring the bell right now, we could have all 40 of us in this town within 30 minutes. I'm confident in saying I'll provide the answer to the phone. But listen, when we're calling and we need help, our folks are committed to this town. And if we can connect with them through our multiple channels, they're here.
There's also something to be said to not having all your assets parked in one parking lot where they could be, whatever, vandalized, blocked in, whatever.
I don't think we'd actually have room anyway, but we'd figure it out if we had to make an adjustment. But.
Any other?
Just if we, just what would the impact be, or you're still, just so we know what the numbers look like? If you back that out, is
About 25,000.
it would be, okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything in special revenue we could use to put toward that? Is that kind of where you were thinking?
Yeah,
Yes, that's definitely an option.
in other areas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it time to move on now? It is. To community development budget?
Oops. Oh, hold on. I'll take my driver's license away. Town planner.
Okay. Community development is comprised of 3 divisions: planning, building, and engineering. So as we go through this budget, a little bit of change from last year, or the previous many years. They're all located in the same area. They're all under one department. Overall, there's a 1% increase department-wide. And we can go through the first division, which it's titled Town Planner, but it's the Planning and Zoning Division. You can see there's a 3.5% decrease overall. The two items of importance in this particular budget. There was a request for a consultant at $50,000 for update the plan of conservation and development. That has been removed from this proposed budget. And also there is a increase in training. There is new state legislation that requires mandatory training for planning and zoning commissioners and mandatory certification for zoning enforcement officials. Overall, a 3.3% decrease. Excuse me.
Questions?
The full-time.
Alan and Jeff love the budget, but you're getting all choked up a little bit.
I just love town planning.
Full-time salary reduction, do we have a vacancy that we're filling?
Yes.
Turnover, and it'll be at the lower end instead of the high end of salary.
Be assistant town planner at this point.
Great. I'm sorry, Ray, can you circle back to the plan of conservation and development? Where was that?
It shows as a zero under consultants, but there was a request from the department that is not included here.
Right, there was a request for $50,000 to hire a consultant to update the 2015 Plan of Conservation and Development.
And there's by state law, we're supposed to update it every, 10 years?
10 years.
Okay, so if it's not this year, we have
Be
to deal with it
next year. I have full faith in our staff here that it can be done in-house. There are no, we already have a very good foundation, the Plan of Conservation and Development. It's been going through implementation phases with PIC for 5 years, at least. We're currently in the process of implementing many of those strategies. And, to update the Plan of Conservation and Development, it does not require a wholesale review, we update demographics. If there are some things that need to be tweaked, you tweak them, and it's updated.
So the plan is to meet the 10-year requirement, but without the expense of hiring a consultant?
That would be my recommendation, yes.
Has the town ever done it that way before?
I don't know if Rocky Hill has, but many towns do. I can, for example, Stafford Springs was the most recent town that comes to my mind that they did it in-house. Previously, in my capacity as a town planner in another town, we had updated our Plan of Conservation and Development.
Okay, thank you.
To that question, are there other resources available through the state or CCM that could help guide us? Because 2015 does not seem like that far away, but in many cases, there's a lot of changes that have happened since then. So I don't know if there's any things that we would want to take into account that would perhaps use the experience from other towns to inform our process.
Yeah, there are many resources from Soil Conservation Service to American Connecticut Chapter, American Planning Association, to other industry organizations, nonprofits. UConn, for example, their Department of Agriculture. And then we already have many of the demographics already online on our website that we can plug in to update demographic information to actually probably more current than what had been done in the past.
So we had planned, I guess, on a consultant this year to help do some of that work. So if we're doing it in-house, probably take longer because our team needs to do it instead of the consultant. So would we start this year and then take a little bit longer, or is starting it next year? Any thoughts on the timing of it? Because we need to get it approved.
Planning and Zoning Commission, they can decide to start it at any time they like. Probably the earlier the better. They don't have to wait for 10 years. They can update it as soon as they like. And if they determine it doesn't need to be, there's nothing that needs to be updated, they can determine that too. Just update, I think, the demographic, socioeconomic information. So the whole host of options and approaches, which will be up to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So at some point, that'll be on their agenda to review and determine how to proceed.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Thanks.
All right.
Moving on to the Building Department.
Yep.
Just one major change. They use a permit tracking software and called OpenGov, for the tracking of their permits issued and payments. And that has proposed an increase in that line item.
And it's actually reflected under dues and subscriptions, which is,
The second category from the bottom of that page. Yeah. And you can see if you go down that last column, you see a lot of negatives, reductions in training, reduction in professional services, again, the telephone, it shows a 17% reduction in the telephone. Again, we're still trying to get the trend on the utilization of the phones and the copiers.
Councilor Greenspan.
Just a question. And I don't mean this as a reflection on the department or the staff within it, but we recently had the issue at Concierge where we had some violations, and from some of the presentations, we thought certain changes were being made by the building management, and they weren't. Kind of the wool was pulled over our eyes. And at the same time, we're cutting our training. Is that the right, do we need to increase our training to make sure that those things don't happen in the future?
No, the building official, he cut the training in accordance to retain training at minimum required for certifications and ongoing certification. What you're talking about is not really a building department issue. It's more of a multiple department issue that we're working on with our legal counsel at this point.
Okay. But training doesn't fix or help solve that problem?
Not this type of training, no.
Okay.
No, it's more of the, updating of the building code, electrical code.
and I just wanted, in training in general, we did make an initiative out to all departments to go back and look at their training lines and only reduce those that they didn't need or weren't available by, like a CCM, which are, some access to us for free training. So each department did look. So at this point, these were either trainings that were not required to keep up or not available through like a CCM type service.
Yeah, that was townwide for every department.
No other questions? We'll move on to
Engineering.
engineering, section C.
Major changes category, reduction of 4.6% overall. Much of that is reflected in the part-time salaries for seasonal employee designation. Again, the training reduction of 20% or $400. You'll see a 100% increase in a photocopier. That also includes, they have a large commercial grade printer for their mapping also in the department.
That's good.
Can you explain the significant reduction in part-time salaries, Ray? What is the function of the position that's being cut?
It's not being cut. It's a seasonal part-time position originally. Yeah, it was seasonal originally. That had grown into a non-seasonal position year-round.
Okay.
We are bringing that back to a seasonal position that will assist in some of the construction projects that will be occurring during the spring and summer, maybe into the fall, that are under the management of the Director of Community Development and Town Engineer.
What's the nature of the position? What type of functions?
Inspections, sidewalk inspections, inspections for road paving on site.
So when you're saying that it previously had been and will again be a seasonal position,
Right.
what is the season for those type of services, and what's the off
Season
season?
basically from March, April to November.
So basically, running the building season. more or
Building
less.
season, right, right.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're good. Switch to Parks and Rec and Facilities.
Okay, Parks and Rec.
All right. Parks, grounds.
Is this grounds or?
Yes.
Yeah, this is
Parks,
grounds.
grounds.
Right.
It'll be the first one.
Section A, grounds.
Go.
Again, contractual salaries, part-time increases. If you go down that column, you'll see a lot of negatives, reductions. The director put together a very tight budget here. Overall, 1.5% increase. Yeah.
What's the head count there?
The number of employees
Yeah.
over the whole Parks and Rec department, or just the
No, just in the
just the
grounds.
grounds?
Just on
We
grounds,
have
yeah.
7 grounds. 7 grounds.
The grounds improvements for 9,500 increase, what is that reflective of?
You want to do that one?
Where are we?
That included, we had a line for Straska, because we hadn't had maintenance line for that before, so we're putting a dollar amount in for the Straska, as well as bringing back, we had cemetery services in the prior year budget, and we'd like to bring back the $5,000 maintenance of cemetery as well. So that's a combination of the $5,000 for the cemetery and then the Straska. Let me scroll up to here.
I know there's been a lot of talk about the cricket facility. Is that a CIP
It is.
issue versus in here? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I'm going to ask a question because I get asked about this constantly. Pickleball court somewhere, there was talk about maybe converting something that's a park to pickleball. Is that even being considered, or is that on the table? I don't know, because I get asked it. I can't tell how many times I get asked.
Pickleball is,
I play too, but
exploded,
everybody's asked,
so-
yeah.
Yes, the director is working on new pickleball courts. So that is definitely a priority.
Is that a CIP issue as well, or?
No,
Is that-
we don't have it as an add-in. It should be something either within the existing, you're doing within existing grounds improvement, Greg?
Elmridge Park.
Grant.
The grant.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
yes.
Yes, that's right.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you.
Yeah.
No more questions on that?
So I guess,
Yep.
so you mentioned it was 9,500 that was added for Straska. What are we planning to do with that?
Well, it's
Straska and cemetery.
Oh, the 90, so it'd be 4,500 for Straska and then 5.
not necessarily split evenly, but, I think it's time we have to start planning for the Straska maintenance line item. Right now, it's kind of difficult to do that because we're going out to bid for the remediation, the soil work and the tree clearing, and that's going to take time. And then we have to make sure we get the barn put up, and then we need to start cleaning up areas that we have, we want to clean up along the roadway and make more, more spaces for clearing more areas for the community garden area. So we're not really sure when we'll get to that, but I think we need to put something in that area to start funding it.
If something comes up later
Yeah,
within the budget year. we can-
Definitely.
Okay. Organized activities?
Moving from grounds to organized activities, Part B.
I'll just point out that you see a reduction on program activities for 5,000, as in the same thought process as we had with the, I shouldn't say the senior lunch, but there is an opportunity to do more funding through the special revenue rather than subsidizing all programs through the general fund. So this is a reduction on program activities, which will be absorbed on the special revenue side.
Reduction on printing also.
Can I ask, what is the source of the funds that are in the special revenue fund that you propose to use here?
That is, well, it's called the Special Revenue Fund. It's fee for service. It'd be, for example, the camp, Sunrise, or any of the Summerscape camps. So it'd be those fees. So it would cover those, the farmers market, any of the concerts. So this may, with that reduction on the general fund side, require additional supporters of the farmers market or the concert series. So it was a dollar amount to subsidize, and we're just making a slight reduction there to be absorbed through other sources, better fees or sponsorships.
The special revenue then is basically user fees or attendance fees and sponsorship money, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Quick question, is the Park and Rec following kind of down the same road or going down the same path as, say, the senior center with reaching out for other sources of revenue like gifts of gratitude? I thought that was a pretty good.
Yeah, they're probably actually more ahead of it.
And maybe
Yeah.
endowment monies or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very active.
They've been ahead of
as
it.
Mona said, they're ahead. They've been doing this for decades.
Yeah.
And this is just continuing. They're experts at getting sponsorships.
And the fees to use facilities is not getting, the residents paying for the right to hold a softball game or
That
whatever
would-
and register
Yep.
and lock in a field. That's going well?
That would still go into this fund. I think we're slow as far as renting the senior center area, but Fields rental is still going very well.
If there's no more questions on that, C, Part C, aquatics.
Aquatics.
Great.
Again, a lot of zeros, negatives, so a very tight budget. I just want to comment on the part-time salaries. You see a reduction. That is, I think, primarily due to Nick in making his staffing changes and schedule changes to make the operation function much more efficiently and much less expensive. So, that will continue throughout the year.
What's the difference between the actual for this year and then for next year? Is that because things had still were slow last year because
Right.
of COVID?
Well, and they have that tendency to run seasonal, so you'll see that we're through that first part, and then it'll peak upward. So you'll see a lot more of that happening for aquatics, May, June.
And the projection is still 150. I got it.
Correct.
What's
Yes.
the date of your actual? This is,
That was actually, to be precise, March 28th. The same. So we missed that last quarter. In all honesty, that line, I think if it wasn't for that scheduling that they do with that department, we're looking at an increase just because of minimum wage, because these are the part-time and the students that are coming in for programs. So to see a negative was very impressive.
We can move on to facilities management budget, and Part A there is building maintenance.
Scrolling through. Can I comment? Good?
Major changes, of course, 10% increase at least of for electricity. And we're looking at a 70% decrease in building improvements. We're looking to put many of them off until 24, 25.
Just on that light and power section, I think we ask every year about our solar farm.
Okay. So yes, we are still getting credits from the solar farm. They are credits that are shared between the town and the Board of Ed. In fact, we kind of, because we just met with them again, and I think we're going to look at the proper distribution. Maybe our credits are falling more to the Board of Ed side, but we're really working very well together on doing a tracking of kilowatts. I'd say actually that dollar amount for the light and power is on the low side. I just have to give a lot of credit to Phil Sear. He's been working with our software package, and he's been at times relentless about people using their power properly with this. Emails are out and telling us to shut off our lights.
Yeah, to everybody.
So
he's really on top of, the conservation.
Well, we've also been changing out parking lot lighting, correct? Is that complete?
He's complete.
Yeah, I think parking lot. There are some lighting issues that we can still improve on at Elm Ridge Park. I don't believe it's in this budget, but not every parking lot, but most all around here in town buildings, yes.
Yeah, and streetlights are under the highway department line.
And just getting back to that power, the solar. It's we have to do allocations. We have 3 blocks, solar blocks. We get 5 accounts for each block. We have to utilize all the power that's generated at a 3 megawatt facility. And the issue that we've been having over the years is allocating the buildings, to try to utilize as much of the virtual net increase in power as we can. And then we have to deal with the Board of Ed because the schools use most of the streetlights, use most
So
of
it's not just a prorated share by square footage?
Oh, no.
No.
No,
That's utilization.
that would be a wonderful thought, but no, it is not.
We hear about this every year for the budget workshop.
Yeah.
But we're one town, one budget. Who cares? I mean, I don't want to simplify it. If we're getting a credit, put it in the budget as a line item. I don't care how you allocate it.
Ideally,
Because at the end of the day, we're approving a $95 million budget. I don't want to know that 20,000 goes to the Board of Ed and 20,000 goes to the town. Just put an allocation in. At the end of the day, it's one pot.
Right.
We're spending a lot of time on it over the years. I don't know. To me, it's just,
Yeah, no, I would
It's an
agree, but
internal issue.
I agree, but even Board of Ed, in fact, Chuck and I spend a lot of time on electricity. And again, because the credits are not in necessarily the right place, for example, he may have, we'll give a for example, he has a bill for one school that has a credit of about $50,000, and he knows that he won't use $50,000 between now and summer. So to get the dollars back. So, I mean, probably from this level, at the council level, it's $1, but from the perspective of the finance people and trying to put the right number on the page, it is a bit of a chasing act to get that. And in fact, it would be great if we could get the credit and say, well, thank you, Eversource, can I have the check now because I overpaid? That doesn't happen. So it has to be a used credit, never a refunded credit. So I understand it would be wonderful if we did do that and just say, let's just, maybe someday you'll pay it, Craig, Chuck, and maybe I'll do it this year. But we would really like to have a good handle on our true cost, because I think that's our finance people. It's our tendency that we want to know what the actuals are, or at least a good estimate. So yeah, I agree. It seems to be frustrating, but it's even more so down in our level. We need to be able to properly use those credits, and our larger users tend to be on the education side. I think if we tried to do a snapshot today, perhaps Board of Ed would budget 0 for electricity, and we could take the rest of the full bill.
And we have to live under caps. There's a cap on production.
So is there a maximum amount of a credit we can get within a year?
Yes.
There is.
So do we know
And
what
we-
that number is, right?
Mhm.
And our goal is to achieve that number.
Our issue, unfortunately, I know I could go on forever. It's a pitiful thing. We actually go through that maximum credit. What happens on the opposite side is we continue to be billed from the solar generator organization. So I've got credits of, $100,000 on the books, but I still have invoices coming in from Tesla for $45,000 a month. So it's when they meet, and you can't recoup your credit from Eversource, but you still continue to have to pay the $45,000 per month from Tesla, and you can't get a check from Eversource. So we have this financial battle that we're dealing with behind the scenes. That's
Yeah,
probably my nicest way
We
of
met
putting
with
it.
Eversource this last week,
Mhm.
and we'll be meeting with them to try to figure this out so we can benefit.
So just so I understand, the town pays Tesla, the town gets one bill from Tesla that covers Board of Ed and the town, but Eversource gives credits separately, is that?
Correct.
See, that's the problem, is that?
And we're really looking at not like a Board of Ed bill and a town bill. We're talking about, 10 bills for Board of Ed and 40 for the town. And then we get the opportunity to allocate the credit to 15 accounts. So it's this, I don't know, Chuck, would you like this school? I think I'm going to use the streetlights this month.
So if one entity's getting too many credits versus electricity
Mhm.
use, the problem is trying to transfer that credit to the other
Right.
other aspects
Yes.
of it. Okay.
It is.
See, it's really an Eversource problem. It's really-
It is. They try to help, but we're not there
But
yet.
Problem for us, not necessarily for
Well,
Eversource.
that's Eversource, that's not us.
Right.
Thank you,
I
Joe.
almost hate to ask, given to pile on, but given that the rates have gone up, I guess they're expected to go down again. But do we think that the change in the electrical rates would open up opportunity to expand the existing site? Because I thought that had been part of the discussion where there was an option for back then Solar City to add more panels there to that site.
Yeah, that option time frame has passed. But if they wanted to come, I don't know if we'd want to do that at this point.
Just
because we can't use efficiently what we have.
That's precisely why we're going to the exercise of understanding, because if we wanted to do another one, is it a yes or no?
Because we can't use
Is there
it.
any value to doing another,
No.
increasing capacity?
Yeah, and they can't. It has to be for municipal service.
Yeah, ours does, yes. We were under that legislative program, the ZREC program, for municipalities, and there were restrictions.
Do we have the ability to shop around for different electric suppliers, like on the Horner side, or
We do.
for the municipal side, it doesn't
Right.
do anything, or?
It would probably, I'd say, maybe where we are now, it would complicate it.
Yeah.
It would complicate it.
Are we on a contractual rate for kilowatt hours, or are we subject to every January and July?
For the solar? For the solar
for,
side?
for our electric rate?
Oh, electric.
No, we still fluctuate. We still fluctuate. And unfortunately, the credit from the solar is stable. So there will be a gap. So probably if Eversource continues to raise the rates, I may be able to absorb my massive credits.
Yeah, we're locked in at 11 cents for Tesla.
So we're locked in with Tesla, but we're not locked into
No.
CLNP or Eversource. Sorry, CLNP for 20 years now.
I have a question, just on building improvements. So in the current year, we have a projected actual of 76.5, and we have plugged in for the coming year 25,000. Has,
On the building improvements.
Building improvements?
Carpeting.
has the strong feel of kicking the can down the road, unless you can convince me otherwise.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. Carpeting at the police station, carpeting at the library, some painting at Public Works. Yeah.
Well, we are just setting ourselves up for a much bigger number next year. The problem with that, it doesn't seem like a realistic figure based on, we had 57,000 actual for 22, we're looking at 76,000 a year we're in, and now 25,000. You just have to justify that.
It's, the minimum what we can do under the, trying to keep this mill rate to a minimum.
I understand that, but is it realistic? We can put in this number to make us feel good, this 25,000, but if it's foreseeable that needs are going to arise that are going to blow that number up, we need to be in front of that.
It is realistic. We've had discussions with the director. Of course, we would love to do what he is recommending to do, but we had, that we were talking about a $2.5 million increase if we did that for every department. We talked about the minimum that we can do without, we need to put off some things until next year. Things will not start falling apart this year, by, staying with this budget.
Yeah, just to maybe clarify that we actually receive a list of projects from facilities, so it's not this is your dollar amount to work with today. So he actually has projects identified. So we did have projects identified for the 22-23 that were done and completed. We had the list, for example, of projects for the 23-24. There were, larger amounts of carpeting, for example, at the library. We'll work on a smaller part and then do the additional in the following year. So I don't think he would allow us to be in that condition where we were needed. If it's a needed, that would be definitely in here. But these are the projects that will be addressed.
And we have a nice new expansion on the senior community center. I don't know, maybe everything is still too new that we need to start building in things for that. Is it just too early? Again, as we expand facilities, it's foreseeable that that's going to expand the demand for, things like this, building improvements and the like.
Again, Phil has a very detailed list of building needs. We would not have cut anything if he was adamant, demanding. He knows his building. So what we have proved, what we proposed is doable without doing harm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I can tell you. We will not let the $9 million senior center fall in decay.
Thank you.
I just had a kind of how this is laid out, a question about how this is laid out. So the capital outlay for building improvements, that doesn't go into capital improvements? Is that just
No.
because they're smaller projects?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. There's these building improvements. I think this year they went to the town garage, did some painting and repairs there. They had some work at police department. So
There's a bunch of smaller
they're
projects.
the in-house type of, let's paint this, carpet this, and so forth.
Any other questions? All right, item B, town custodial services.
Okay. Of significance, if you see painting, it looks like 100% reduction in that line item. That's been moved into the building maintenance
Correct.
previous section we just went through. Again, you see reductions in phone, increase in uniforms and cleaning, just increase in costs, obviously, just to do that, just in contracting. And overall, it's an 8.9% increase.
Did we have a new hire that the full-time salary, because full-time salaries go up 11%?
Actually, what that is they settled their union contract. It's a smaller group that covers the custodial and some of the tradespeople. So they actually settled their contract July of '22, so it was after the adoption. So you're seeing 2 years of salary increase.
Retroactive.
Correct.
Okay, so that's like one-time anomaly, hopefully.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We're good there. We can go to our last category of the budget for this evening, which is the library. Mary?
Okay.
Not least. You want what?
Let's see. Okay. If you look at the, there was a move from a part-time position to a full-time position this year. And we have 2 to 3 openings available. And if it was fully staffed, we would have that figure $18,450, which is a 13.8% increase. I'm looking at union increases and also minimum wage increases for those two categories.
Yeah. Yeah, in that part-time line, we actually have 2 part-timers that are within a bargaining unit. That's probably the only department that you'll see that happen. So as they get the bargaining unit increases, and we also had to contend with, again, the minimum wages in some of these part-time lines, as long as we have to keep up. So the part-time looks on the high side as well.
And in training, there was a cut in training of $500, 22, almost 23%.
And that's library books.
Library, total library books. They're not just books these days. It's the software. It's, the that comes with the digital information. It's the some of the contracts for data researching, databases.
Can I go back to the salaries? Why is this actual number 84 budgeted with 133 and 23? And it's now back to 146.
Yeah,
then-
no, it's
What's
because
going on
we
with
do
the
have
84?
vacancies. Yeah, because there are vacancies at this time, and when we're preparing the budget for next year, we're hopeful that all positions will be filled. So you'll see that tend to be at 84 because she has been functioning with a number of vacancies. So this is
So
to.
what is the reason for those vacancies? Because she couldn't find the individuals, or she could do without them?
People, they move on. And,
Of course.
Yeah. And I guess, it's just finding the right people.
The,
No, I'm-
the 84 though is actual today. You're projected to end the year at 146.
That's as
84 is through the end of March, yeah, and
Correct.
projected is so that's
So
$60,000.
So are you gonna? Yeah, that's what I can't get. Like we're gonna spend like that much amount of money between now and end of the year.
No, we will not, because in fact, in all honesty, those vacancies still exist.
So why is the projection 146 then?
I think we would like to adjust that.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at.
Thank you.
So then the question is, how are we gonna go from 84, or maybe let's say you spent $125,000. Why are we going from 125 to 152? that's a big increase. If I'm again, like I'm asking this in good faith, because if we are like running the library with $100,000 right now of part-time people, why do we need 152 suddenly?
Yeah, I think as I was mentioning, there are 2 positions in there that are 24-hour positions that are bargaining unit positions, so they'll get the increases along with the bargaining unit. And if these positions were all filled, which is what we're budgeting for, that everything would be filled, we would have to be filling them at something greater than minimum wage at least. So you're saying that we had in the 22-23 budget the lower part-time rate, and then we'll have a larger increase just to make sure that we are keeping ourselves above the minimum wage.
So how are the operations today? Like, how are they? How are things going at the library without those 2?
So I think your question is, okay, we're operating now without those 2.
Yeah.
Why do we need those 2 if we're operating?
Yeah, for a full
efficiently,
year.
right?
For a full year. I mean, we are not talking about a month, 2 months. We're talking a whole year almost.
I think that's the question I need to ask Mary to come up and just answer that question, Mary, if you can.
Hi. One of the differences is that I am down a person in the full-time, so I was able to get the staffing through the part-time. So that's why the part-time was higher this year, but if you notice, the full-time was lower.
No, actually, my question is like, your part-time is pretty low right now. Why is it not what you budgeted for?
Well, it was,
Actual through March, it was at 84, so
yeah, actual through March.
and still 2
Yeah, but what I'm
vacants.
saying is you still got a ton of money there. Are you going to spend all of it in the next few months?
No, I would expect not. I think we should adjust that. Again, we were looking in March and looking at ideally having all positions funded. So I definitely would revisit that projection. You still have 2 vacancies currently in part-time, at least 2?
Right.
So how are the operations right now? Like, are you doing well without those positions out there?
We're missing them. I mean, we've cut back on a little bit of programming and things, and we really want to gear up now. We were able to slow down because of the pandemic, so we did slow down because of the pandemic, but we're sort of back now. So, I mean, it was last summer, we didn't have a full summer program because there were people that still wouldn't come into the library. But so we really made a conscious decision since the summer 2020 to not fill some of these positions, but we are now seeing the need for them.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's a 13% increase, right, on the part-time when you're not using currently the whole allocation. I mean, it just seems to me kind of, I cannot explain it like myself, so I'm trying to look for help from you because there's an increase built in, which is not small. It's 14% almost, while we are not spending the budget which is out there.
And I guess just to because when we first started talking about, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned a part-time went to a full-time.
No,
Correct.
So,
Yeah, and that's,
Did I make
You
an
did.
error?
You-
Yeah, and by the way,
That did not happen.
that did not happen.
No.
Not in
Okay,
that
because
department.
It was, we
Let's back up
backfilled
then. That's-
some part-timers with the full-time salary.
I'm sorry, say it again.
So we're down 1 full-time staff member, but we used some part-timers to help us with that salary.
Okay.
But we aren't, we're actually down overall, 2 full-time, but we're not planning to fill one of them. And then we're down some union of the 24 hours.
Correct.
And we're not planning to fill all of them. But the last couple of years, we haven't really filled this contractual salary. When they get raises, we've just sort of absorbed it. which is why the last couple of years we were sort of zero and we hadn't, but now we have these contractual.
Just let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more.
Sure.
I think your question, you're operating now without those positions. You know, how's it going and why do you need those positions in the future? And just from my point of view, Mary has cut back on some of her programming already, and she has other programming that she wants to continue doing and increase. And I think from a staffing level, she needs to have those 2 staffers in the future to continue programming. Because she does more, you know, the library is more than books. There are a lot of programs that she does.
Of course.
And I think her bulk of her work is programming and programs and community outreach. So those are the reasons why she needs these additional positions.
So what's the cost of each position within that 152?
You have, well, I don't know, you have your list there. So she's actually got 6 reference part-timers, 10 library assistants, and 3 bookshelvers are to be funded from that. So obviously the rates would vary. 2 of them are in the union contract because they're the 24-hour positions. So you can have a large number of those.
No, I'm just about the 2 vacant positions.
Gosh, what do we have, about 40? I'm guessing, unfortunately. I'm thinking you're in the 40,000 range. You're not,
You mean their salary?
for the 24-hour.
Oh, 20, yes.
Yeah, your 24-hour person is 40. I hope
For
they're not
one or
looking
for
at
2?
their check, but yes, correct.
I'm sorry, for 1 or for 2?
1. There are 20, it's actually a 24-hour person.
Okay, so you have 152,000 in that line, so 80,000 of that is for 2 new positions to get filled that are not filled for 80,
Roughly.
and the other 72 is for existing ones already.
Right. Fewer hours, obviously.
So I think what I heard you say is you had to cut back on programming during the pandemic, and you're hoping, so you're obviously
We're-
less than what was pre-pandemic.
Right, I mean,
And-
we sort of came back.
And you're hoping this summer to
Well,
go,
definitely this summer,
going
but we-
forward to do
Right.
back to what you were
What we
before, and
were.
maybe increase the program.
Right, still down 1 staff member, but we're hoping to come back. But we started coming back like January, and as I said, this month, we feel like we're really back. We're having the 1st graders come, we're having the 3rd graders come, things that haven't happened since 2019.
So that increased staffing to the regular level would bring you back more or less to what you were doing before.
But minus 1 staff member, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the transition into more normalcy, back to normalcy, because you did do a lot of programming during, as I understand it, during the COVID. You were online. Are all those things still going?
Well, we're still doing some online. What we did was we partnered with the 4 towns, and so we did a lot of things online, but it didn't cost as much because we were doing with the 4 towns. Now people are really wanting in person, so we can't share, we can't say go to Newington. I mean, in some cases we say go to Newington for this, but we can't share as many programs as we used to. They're more staff intensive. If we had an online program that we shared with the 4 towns, it only took like 1 staff member to be the Zoom person kind of thing. But now we have the individual programs.
So the expectation is more to be in person now. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely, it's more in person.
And you have the isolation reading center, right? That you
We've got our pod.
The pod?
The pod, yes, yeah.
And how is
That's great. People appreciate it so much. We have a booking system and people are booking it every day. And then I'm pushing people into the phone booth to take their phone calls. They're doing job interviews in there. They're doing telehealth calls.
And have you, the library used to be a big spot for seniors, but now that the senior center is up and going, is there a balancing out of your, or has it changed your demographic?
No, I mean, people are still coming in, the seniors still coming in for books, checking out books and things like that, attending the programs where we partner with the senior center on programs, but we're really 2 different, like, targeting things, and we've offered programs at the senior center. We're having fun with that, of going and getting a whole new audience for me to talk about ChatGPT and virtual reality,
Yeah,
which,
'cause it seems like the lunch is an opportunity.
well, we do it right before lunch.
And then I guess a number of people in town, their computers actually at the library, right?
That's correct.
How does the replenishment of that software go? Is that through a different grant, or does the town fund that?
IT funds the software.
IT funds that, okay. And is that on a schedule? I guess maybe an IT question. But.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mary or the library?
Sorry, I know we talked a lot about the staffing. So you were down 2 full-time people. If this goes through, we're going to still be down 1 full-time person, but we think we can make do. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we're good. Everybody good?
Yep.
All right.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night. Thank you.